Hey everybody, Max Boltman here alongside the Athletic Scott Wheeler and Corey Pronman and Flow Hockey's Chris Peters for another episode of the Athletic Hockey Show Prospect Series. And guys, there will be some young player prospects discussed today, but I would say this really falls more in the category of more like the scouting series, because what we're talking about today is the Olympic rosters for USA and Canada. We're going to do kind of a mock preliminary roster meeting. These rosters are going to be due at the very end of the calendar year, December 31st, and all that these GMs have to do is whittle down pools of the very best players on earth into neat, tidy teams of 23. Should be very simple for them. Now, we do have a nice starting place because we saw the Four Nations rosters, but Corey and Scott did us the huge favor of going through in advance and tearing out some of the players that we're going to be discussing. So as we start with Team Canada here, I want to go ahead and have you read the locks for Team Canada.
The locks for Team Canada up front, I think, are pretty straightforward. It breaks down into just 6 names. I think we saw the middle of the roster get a little bit muddied with different performances at the Four Nations, but the core 6 is Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, Braden Point, Sam Reinhart, Mitch Marner, and Sidney Crosby. I think up front, it would be pretty surprising for any of those players not to be a part of this group. And then on defense, it's a much smaller group. Defense is where everything seems to be wide open. I think in net, Jordan Binnington is considered a lock, but on D, it might just be 2, if not 1 names. And I'd be interested to hear feedback on the second name. We all know that Cale Makar is on the team. Cale Makar is going to be the number 1 defenseman for the team. He's going to run the top power play for the team. He's probably even going to penalty kill for this team. And then the second name that I sort of felt was a lock when I was flipping through them was Josh Morrissey, who's been kind of at the fringes of Norris ballots over the last few seasons here and has really established himself as one of the better defensemen in the Western Conference and the number 1 defenseman on one of the top teams in the league in Winnipeg. So I don't think any of those are up for debate except maybe Morrissey, who there's probably an argument to be made that guys like Shea Theodore and Devin Taves are equals to Josh Morrissey, but they played Morrissey a lot at the Four Nations, and I think he's a pretty safe bet.
I assume nobody has any quibbles with that group. I mean, did anyone feel like Morrissey doesn't belong in the locks group here?
I think he does. I mean, I think that really for Canada, it is interesting because I think you're talking about how do you balance this group? What kind of style do you need? And those are questions that are going to be answered down the lineup a little bit. I think in terms of consistent performers, it's hard to find better than Morrissey in terms of a guy where you know exactly what you're getting out of him on a night-to-night basis. And then you've also got, the Four Nations as the example. And, I think it's hard to argue with some of the guys that were there, but obviously they're going to have to make a couple of changes here. So really, it's actually pretty fascinating because we're going to talk about the U.S. later, where I think that the decisions are maybe fewer in terms of how many there will actually have to be made. But yeah, I mean, I think to Scott's point, the fact that we're only talking really about 2 locks on D kind of suggests that there's a lot of questions that need to be answered about how Canada wants to play at the Olympics with the group that they have available to them.
All right, so the meat of this discussion is probably going to be on the bubble guys. But before we get to the bubble, Scott, there's also a tier of players who you think are going to be on this team. It's just not quite in the Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid lock level. And those players that you have singled out here are Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, Sam Bennett, Seth Jarvis, Mark Stone, Brad Marchand at forward. And on D, Thomas Harley, Shea Theodore, Devon Taves, in goal, Aiden Hill, Sam Montembeault. As I went through that forward list of the front runners and I got to Mark Stone and Brad Marchand, I started to feel a little bit less sure that those are true front runners. And I don't know, those might be more bubble guys for me. Is that, what do you think about this, Corey?
I tend to agree, particularly Marchand. Even though he looked better in the playoffs there for Florida, he really struggled at the Four Nations. And you wonder with same argument can be made for Stone in some ways, which is just the age of those players. And we're going to maybe get that with like a Drew Doughty too when we get to him, is you get those 35 plus guys a year older. And you kind of wonder whether they're not that they can't make the team, but whether definitely Marchand is like, if he's a front runner or not. I think he's going to need to have a really good first half, just to be considered a top 12 forward on this team.
So Scott, why did you consider them? I mean, obviously they're on the Four Nations team. That is a feather in their cap, but what made you feel like they belonged in this category?
I think part of it for Brad is experience with the coaching staff, experience in general, his identity as a player, heart and soul guy. I think they likely view him as a player who can play up and down the lineup, who can play with any mix of line mates, who could play on their fourth line, who could slide up a little bit higher. I think him and Bennett are in a unique position now that Alexander Barkov is out in Florida, where they're going to have to be counted on early on this season. And I think that will be of benefit to them. They're probably going to play more. They're going to be more involved in the power play. Their points, I think, despite how valuable Barkov is as a line mate for some of the players there, this might go for Carter Verhaeghe there too. There's just more of an opportunity now for these guys, especially Bennett, to really step up. But I think Brad sort of fits into that group as well. And push comes to shove, it just feels like if it's between him and a Robert Thomas or a Nick Suzuki or a younger player who also struggled at last year's tournament like Travis Konechny, I think push comes to shove, they will just go with the guy that Hockey Canada knows, and that's Marchand. Stone's an interesting one. I don't really view Stone as a bubble guy. Like I think Stone would have to play poorly in the front half of the season not to be on this team. They're going to trust him. I think they would view him as a penalty killer, defensive zone guy. Like I think they just trust Mark Stone. Marchand's the one where I could see the argument that you guys are making more so than Stone, I think. And I didn't even love Stone at last year's tournament.
No, I didn't either. Shea Theodore is one I wonder about too. Not that I don't think he won't make the team, but I think a lot of the conversation we're going to have about Canada and the U.S. bubble players is in regards to how they played at the Four Nations, and he didn't play at the Four Nations last year due to injury. So he's a guy who I just wonder if I think when you start getting to 7th, 8th D, like he's somewhere in that conversation for Canada. But we're talking about by putting him here, basically insinuating he's a top 4D for them, and I'm not quite sure that's a guarantee right now.
I think with Stone, Chris, the thing that I come back to is his career has been amazing. Mark Stone 3 years ago, I think, is not even just a front runner, probably a lock for this team. The injuries have started to catch up, and I don't think that this is going to be like a super physical tournament, at least not in the way the Four Nations was. But I do think we can have a Nick Suzuki, who's also an elite NHL two-way forward. And it's a younger player who I think you just feel a little better about where the body's going to be at, and you're going to be bringing him along for the future. That's where I would start to go, why not Suzuki over like a Stone?
Yeah, I think that's probably the player that I would look at as well. I mean, and even you could say, we're going to probably talk about him as well. What about a Celebrini on the wing, as well as a guy that has kind of this more, he plays the game hard. He's got good two-way capabilities. He's got the speed factor. I think when you look up and down the Canada lineup and you have, the guys that I think that you want to have a team that has that physicality, which is, physicality, but also plays with a lot of pace. And I think that the Olympics are going to be played at a pace even faster than what we saw at the Four Nations. And so that's one of those spaces where I do start to worry a little bit about Mark Stone in terms of the overall capability, in terms of the just keeping up with it. And where guys like Suzuki and potentially Celebrini or others that are a little bit younger and, like you said, kind of have a little bit more of that reliability factor to them in terms of their health, that's also important. So, I don't have too many quibbles. Like, I think Stone is absolutely in the mix here. I think he's going to be a guy that they have to take a really long look at, considering, so many of the different things that he brings to the table, not the least of which is, the fact that he's got experience in these high level situations. But yeah, I mean, I just think that these are going to be those types of decisions, though, are the ones that I think are really critical for this Canada team, because I don't think you can use the Four Nations as a one-to-one blueprint for what you're going to do here. I think you got to take some of the learnings, and like we said, didn't have an amazing Four Nations. How can you afford that at the Olympics, where the stakes just feel higher? There's so much more attention, and obviously there's a lot of pressure. But I think in the veteran presence department, that's something that I could see this coaching staff much more comfortable with a Mark Stone relative to the two guys that we just talked about.
I think it's interesting that none of us mentioned Seth Jarvis in the conversation of front runner guys that we would be uncertain about, with Seth being the youngest player from that group.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, some of the things that we just said, like this is a team that's going to want to play with pace. This is a team that's going to want to be up and down the ice quickly. And I think that he brings that. I think we've seen that from him now a little bit more frequently. And I just think with that year that extra experience that he has now, and also getting through, the Stanley Cup playoffs a little bit more, kind of doing some of these other things. Jarvis is a guy that, while he doesn't necessarily have the size, he does just about everything you need for a player to win hockey games, when it comes to playing with the ability to get up and down the ice and then also playing hard. He's a bit of a pest and kind of gets under guys' skin, but does it in a way that's not going to hurt you in the penalty box. It's not going to hurt you in a lot of other ways. So I really think that, with this, we have to keep in mind that the Four Nations was not played with IIHF rules. It was played with NHL rules, essentially, which does create a different kind of game.
Yeah.
I think players like Seth Jarvis fit really well into that.
It's a versatility.
Bring it back to Marchand for a second. I think you can kind of have a debate about one of those guys versus the other. And I think obviously Marchand's been a fantastic NHL player through his career, and you can argue has more pure skill than Jarvis. But I think if you're looking for a fourth line winger with energy, I think Jarvis probably has a better case to be that player in February.
Do we have any qualms with me slotting Thomas Harley ahead of Travis Sanheim, Colton Parayko, Drew Doughty, 3D, who were also on that team last year?
I don't, because I think Harley became one of the breakout stories of that tournament, right? Right at the same level as maybe even more than like a Matt
the
Boldy.
league.
Yeah, and the league throughout, as Miro Heiskanen was hurt and he took on more and more attention. I think Thomas Harley goes into this. I think he's got a spot to lose almost.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. That's isn't that crazy how that happens though? He just ends up on the team, and then it's like, oh, hey, this guy is actually probably better at this point.
That's going to be the same conversation with Jake Sanderson, who wasn't on the team, and then by the end, he was one of their best players.
Yep, exactly.
That's a better comp.
I wonder even in Dallas if there's a bit of a push and pull this year between Harley and Heiskanen in terms of some of the offensive zone opportunities and that kind of a thing, power play, and it'll be interesting.
We're going to go now to, I think, the meat of this discussion, which is the bubble. So, Scott, from what you've outlined, you had 12. I think we're kind of talked Marchand into the bubble conversation. So we're going to say we've got 11 forwards, 5D, and 3 goalies for this Canadian roster. That leaves 3 forwards and 3D to battle this out that are going to make for some really interesting decisions between now and December 31st. What I want going into that is for each of you to give me, let's start with the forwards. Which 3 forwards, Corey, would you take from this bubble group to complement Canada's forward group?
Oh man, this is really tough, and it's going to be hard not to make some people very mad, depending on which way we go. The one name that stood out to me right away is Robert Thomas. Like, I think he's Nick Suzuki with the skill, the hockey sense, the two-way ability, but there's a little bit more pace in his game. I know you guys mentioned Suzuki earlier. I would lean towards Thomas as kind of like that all-around centerman that I'd like to bring. So I think he's the obvious one to me. And then after that, it gets really murky. I would have a hard time bringing Konechny after how he looked at the Four Nations. I think he probably played his way out of the mix for me, barring a really good first half. Tavares is how we have listed him as a bubble guy here. I think his skating would be too problematic for me to get him in there. The one name I'm really drawn to, and it's not a sexy name, and it's not maybe the highest scoring name of this group, like Scheifele would be or Suzuki, would be Carter Verhaeghe. This is a guy who's just won 2 Stanley Cups. I think there's a lot of elements in his game that are really attractive. He's a good skater. He works hard. He's got plenty of offense. You can deploy him in a variety of situations. You look at that Florida team, and we talk about Marchand earlier. I think there were plenty of times you watch them and you think Verhaeghe was just as impactful, if not more so. And I think that'd be the second name for me. The third name gets really dicey. I think the best player is Suzuki. I don't know if I can bring Thomas and Suzuki. I think you need a little bit more variety there. I'm guessing it would be either, Zach Hyman or Scheifele from my third forward. And I might lean towards Scheifele just in case one of my skill guys go down and I need some money there to give me some offense. That's the way I'd have it. It's kind of funny when you think about this, is I can see one or all of you guys having 3 completely different names. And like, I'd be really curious to see how much we actually overlap. Cause like I didn't even mention like Celebrini, who I'd love I love the idea of bringing Celebrini. I love Macklin Celebrini, but it might be too early. And we mentioned, I don't know. We'll see what everybody says here.
But is there such thing as, because I think Celebrini would be in my 3 here. I think I would like the fact that he's young. And I think it's a good thing for the Canadian program to bring a guy like that, who I think absolutely is ready to play at the level. But more importantly, even if he is your 14th forward and isn't playing, he's soaking that up. He's seeing what it feels like. Maybe he gets into 1 or 2 games in group play. I'm not saying Canada has to build their 2026 Olympic roster with 2030 and 2034 in mind, but it's not a bad thing to keep in the back of your head, much like we see at the World Juniors, Chris.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, and Celebrini would be in my 3 as well. And I think that it's not just about preparing for the future. I think that he does a lot of the things that Suzuki does, but faster. I think he also has some of these, he just, the way he plays just fits really well. And that's the thing, is like Suzuki, to me, like if you're asking me among the bubble players who I would have on there, Suzuki would be one of my 3. And I think that it does come down like him and Robert Thomas. I think Scheifele would also be in that group for me. And then on top of that, I would also have Carter Verhaeghe. So you'd have, if we're just selecting the guys off the bubble, but I think you want some of that two-way element. I think Robert Thomas, you could really interchange him, Suzuki, Celebrini in that mix. That's a guy I could see. Like, the thing is that if you bring a Macklin Celebrini for your 4th line, I don't think that's a problem. Like, I think he's actually going to help you. He's going to be a matchups guy. He's going to make things more difficult on the opposing team. I don't think it's too soon for him. Same thing. Suzuki's going to do that same thing for you. Robert Thomas is going to do that same thing for you. I think any of those guys have the versatility to fit into a role. I just think that for me, Celebrini brings the most of anybody, even without that experience. But then Scheifele, I think, for him, you've got so many different factors that go for him in terms of where you can put him in the lineup. I think he's a Swiss Army knife in terms of your top 9, where, can he play with anybody? I do think he could. And then on top of that, as Corey mentioned, the Carter Verhaeghe factor, the championship success, the style of play, everything that he kind of brings to the table, I think you could utilize. And he's another one of those guys where you can kind of put him in a bunch of different situations.
Am I the only one lost there on who the 3 Chris actually picked?
I think it's Verhaeghe, Scheifele, Celebrini.
Yes, Verhaeghe,
right?
Scheifele, Celebrini. Yeah, exactly. But I'm saying, like, that's the nice thing about where you're at with Team Canada in terms of the depth that you have to select from, because basically I just gave you 3 guys. Make it a pick 'em. I picked Celebrini. And then you've got your other guys that kind of fit into any variety of role that you kind of need. For me, Scheifele would probably, he wouldn't be on my 4th line. He'd be somewhere in probably on the 3rd line. And then you've got Verhaeghe, who can kind of go wherever you need him to.
The most interesting part of this debate for me is that I actually think typically when you're picking these last 3 spots, you are laser focused on role and on rounding out your roster. I think in Canada's case, because we've slotted players like Sam Bennett, like Anthony Cirelli, like Brandon Hagel, like Seth Jarvis, potentially like Mark Stone and Brad Marchand, Canada already actually has a lot of players who can do different things, who can play different roles, who can play in your bottom 6. And I actually think what's needed here is a little bit more skill. And so for my 3, I would probably gravitate towards Suzuki and Thomas. I just think they give you a little more playmaking, a little more feel on the puck than a player like a Zach Hyman does, for example, or that a Carter Verhaeghe does, for example. So I think Suzuki and Thomas would be 2 for me that feel like they should be on the team. Like, they're less bubble guys and more guys that I would want in this mix with the rest of the collection of players that Team Canada already has penciled in. And then I think I go back to where everybody seems to be going back, which is I think Macklin Celebrini has a legit case to be brought over a Konechny or a Hyman or a Scheifele or a Verhaeghe. I just think there's value for now and for the future to getting Macklin Celebrini into this mix. And even if he's your 12th, 13th, 14th forward, I think you feel good about potentially slotting him onto your power play at some point if somebody gets injured, or potentially playing him a little higher in your lineup. And you can feel that way about Mark Scheifele or John Tavares or whoever else as well. But Celebrini, I think, just gives you a little bit more juice. And I think it's important that he be there for the future. So I think I'd probably go Suzuki, Thomas, Celebrini.
And I'd be Celebrini, Suzuki, and Zach Hyman because I think Zach Hyman can score you those dirty goals where it's a big game. You don't know how this puck's going in. He's going to have his stick right around the blue paint. He's played with Connor McDavid. You can play him down your lineup. He can do whatever you need him to do. And I think Suzuki honestly, Canada has to Scott's point, you do not have to pick and choose roles here. You don't have to hunt penalty killers. You don't have to look centers. But I don't think it's ever going to hurt you to have a guy like Nick Suzuki who is that well-rounded and can do everything. So to me, those would be my three. Chris's were Verhaeghe, Scheifele, and Celebrini. Scott's were Suzuki, Thomas, and Celebrini. Corey, remind me yours again.
Thomas, Scheifele, and Verhaeghe.
All right. So we do have some good variability there. Thomas makes it onto multiple, Suzuki makes it onto multiple, Celebrini makes it onto 3 of the 4. So that's the forwards. Now we're going to do the same thing with the D, same number of spots, 3 to decide. We'll do it in the reverse order. Scott, your final 3 defensemen on Team Canada here.
So I'll start with the D that we'd kind of slotted, and we used Canada's orientation camp as the basis for this, but we've been through the top 5 D in theory. So we've been through Makar, Morrissey, Harley, Theodore, Taves, and then there's sort of this next group vying for the final 3 spots. We've slotted 3 players who were on last year's team, Travis Sanheim, Colton Parayko, and Drew Doughty, and we've slotted 1 player who wasn't on last year's team as in that same bubble group, and that's Evan Bouchard. I think there are other players who are in the mix, and I'll be interested to see whether anybody raises them. The other 4D invited to Canada's orientation camp that we haven't discussed were Mackenzie Weegar, Aaron Ekblad, Brandon Montour, and Noah Dobson. I don't feel like Ekblad, Montour, and Dobson are really in this mix. I think Weegar is an interesting one because he's very comfortable playing both sides. And the idea of bringing a 7 or 8D who can play the left and right side, I think is really compelling. And I think they like Mackenzie Weegar. I would probably go. I think Evan Bouchard belongs on the team. I've made this case on Twitter and on social media and that kind of a thing. But I think Evan Bouchard, even with his warts, belongs on this team. I think he's going to make more plays go in the other direction and down ice and offensively, even if he's on your PP2, or even if you want Josh Morrissey on your PP2 and Bouchard's in a third pairing role and just a puck mover. I think the headaches that come with Evan Bouchard, and I understand why a coaching staff would get squeamish with him. I think the headaches that come with Evan Bouchard have proven in back-to-back runs to the Stanley Cup final to be more than offset by everything else he adds. I think he's been excellent in back-to-back playoffs, especially 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I thought Evan Bouchard was world-class in that playoff run. Last year, I just thought he was really good. But Evan Bouchard would be one of them. I just think there's a quality gap between Evan Bouchard and Travis Sanheim, Colton Parayko, Drew Doughty at this stage in his career. And I'm going to go with Drew Doughty and Mackenzie Weegar as my last 2. I didn't love Sanheim. I'm not convinced that Parayko is sort of up to the task. So Parayko and Sanheim would probably be my cuts, and I'd go with Bouchard, the veteran in Doughty, and Mackenzie Weegar, who I like because he can play both sides.
All right, Chris, I think that goes to you next.
Yeah, as you kind of look through, I think that the case to have Evan Bouchard on the roster is pretty strong. I think you want that power play weapon on your roster. I think that that's a guy that you can have. Now they have players that can fit into those roles, and maybe he's not as established as some of these others. And I think creating the power play units for this team is one of the great problems a coaching staff can have because you have so many great options available to you. But I think Bouchard to me is one of those players that yes, he does fit what you need. I think that this is a game where the finesse, the puck moving, the ability to get a big shot off and get some traffic in front is all going to help you in this. So I think Bouchard is a guy there. I do think it gets trickier, as you go forward in terms of what you would have next. To me, I think that Sanheim is an option. I think that he'll be fine. It's not, I don't think you love it. So I actually am thinking more along the way of, Doughty is kind of the known commodity. So like for me, I think having a Drew Doughty who has been through the Olympics, who has done this, who has obviously played in the big moments, I do think that he is a better option at that point. And then I'm also on the Mackenzie Weegar train here, just for the reasons that Scott mentioned, having a guy that can play both sides, not getting so tied up with handedness in terms of different things, like just trying to make sure that you have good options. I think he gives you some good two-way capabilities. Certainly a guy that does a little bit of everything you need. But again, we talk about this balance, and I think you look at when we talk about Team USA, we're going to see a lot of different styles of defensemen. What I think is interesting, and you could say Cale Makar is going to play a ton of minutes. He's going to get all those opportunities. But how do you insulate him? How do you make sure that those other shifts are valuable? And I think by one Bouchard gives you kind of some of that more offensive capability that you're going to need, I think, at this tournament. Because when you look at some of the other rosters, they're going to have a lot of those guys that are quicker, puck moving defensemen, and having a bunch of trees doesn't necessarily give you, the best foot forward. But I think for Canada's blue line, I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's a significant weakness. But when you look at that compared to the forwards, it does look quite a bit different. So so for me, it ends up being Bouchard, Doughty, Weegar as well. I think Weegar is one of those guys. He's kind of interchangeable with some of these others, but I think with Doughty's experience, Bouchard's offensive capabilities, and Weegar's versatility, that to me is the best group.
For me, the way I look at this, and I agree about that, you don't need, you're not going to have this physical blue, type of game that we saw at the Four Nations, right? But I do think Colton Parayko has the size and specifically the length that this team lacks. I mean, they have some tall guys, but I don't think they combine it with muscle in that way. I think that is the play here, is to take Colton Parayko. I agree you can take Bouchard, partly because of the guys that you have higher in the lineup. None of them need the second power play. They can all do it, but I don't think any of them need it in the same way. Shea Theodore can do it. Josh Morrissey can do it. Thomas Harley can do it, but I don't think they're going to do it at quite the level Bouchard would. So I would take Parayko. I would take Evan Bouchard. And then I think I didn't come into this expecting to take Drew Doughty, but I think I kind of have to. I don't think there's anyone who makes an obviously more compelling case than to take this kind of veteran presence who's been there, done that. So I think that's where I land.
The question with the Bouchard conversation becomes, I get the power play aspect there for him and the skill and the hockey sense and the shot he has. But if you're bringing him, I think one question is he actually going to be on a power play? Is he actually going to play? Or is he kind of like your seventh, eighth, which is fine. But then I think you actually, to what Max said earlier, you got to think about who is actually running the second power play. Is it Morrissey? Is it Theodore or someone else? I think Doughty stands out as the first one that I bring. I thought, even though he's going to be up there in age, and that is a concern for me, and he wasn't really healthy last year also, but I think he was good enough at the Four Nations. He's a very well-rounded player, and he'd be a guy I'd be happy to be the sixth, because we've already locked in 5, so he's the sixth. And then the seventh, to Max's points earlier, I'd lean Parayko. The size, skating, physicality combo is pretty, unique for him, especially among this group. He can be a penalty killer, tough minutes guy, D-zone draw guy, limited minutes type of player. And then you get to the 8th, and this gets really tricky here. I have some reservations on Sanheim, kind of what Scott alluded to. They weren't invited, but I look at Jacob Chickering, I look at Thomas Chabot, and I almost kind of wonder, what can they do? What he does, what Weegar does, and maybe even do it better. I think Chabot and Chickering are both better skaters than both of those guys. Weegar, to me, I don't think the skating's good enough to be a Team Canada Olympic guy. I'd have some reservations there. Bouchard's skating definitely isn't good enough, but the options run thin here. I can't, in good conscience, bring Aaron Ekblad over Evan Bouchard. So I think I bring Bouchard as the 8th. I'm gritting my teeth while I do it, but that'd probably be the way I have it there. And, and then obviously if there's injuries or whatnot, you put him in there, you make him the second power play guy and limit his even strength minutes.
What a horrible punishment, Corey, to have to bring a defenseman who's put up a point per game for 3 years running to the Olympics. What a horrible grit your teeth kind of situation.
Like I said, that raises the question. We're all bringing him. Who here has him in the starting 6?
He'd be in my 6.
I think he's running power play too. Yeah, I think that does fit.
So you're benching both Parayko and Doughty for him?
That's a good point. Do you dress 7 though
you do dress
IHF?
You dress 7, but you're not going to roll 7. Be realistic.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Because you roll 7, he's, if nothing else, 7, and I do think he is on a power play. I think he's got too good a weapon to not have.
Well,
him on
you
the power
can't
play.
dress him and not put him on the power play. What's the point of that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that's it. When you have the 7 slot.
So could you
That's
play
the
him
guy.
like 8 minutes a night, or 8
Yeah,
to
you
10
see-
minutes in a game?
You
and
see that
6
all
of
the
them are
time
power
at like
play?
World
Yeah.
Juniors and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Guys do it all the time.
Cale Makar played like 3 minutes at his World Juniors, like 3 minutes a game. It was all power play, and he led the team, led defensemen in scoring in the tournament. So, I mean, it happens.
So there's your path. So Bouchard and Doughty both unanimous, by the way, 4 for 4 on that, and then it was 2 for Weegar and 2 for Parayko.
Which I do think is a bit of an indictment of the depth of the Canadian blue line here, because I do think like Doughty being one of your best options, as good as he has been over the course of his career, is not that player. He's not that same player. You're taking him because you want the insurance, and that's the thing where I find it like it was not a hard decision to have Doughty on this roster for me because of what Corey said. It's like, are you bringing Ekblad over him? Are you bringing Chychrun over him? But guys like that, no, you're not.
Yeah.
So
I think that's also why it's not a hard decision to have Evan Bouchard in that 6. Like I would have Doughty as the 7 and scratch Weegar with the 3 that I brought. And then Doughty's your guy where if somebody's struggling, he's someone you can trust to go in and sort of slot into whoever's pairing and play a regular shift and whatnot. But I don't think there's an easy case to be made that even without the power play that Drew Doughty or Aaron Ekblad or Mackenzie Weegar are having a greater impact on the game than Evan Bouchard.
All right, let's hit the goalies really quick here, Scott, because I think we don't have another spot to give a goalie, but I think Canada is the country with, I would say, the biggest, like Binnington is the starter. I think we've seen that very clearly, but I think you feel the least confident of any of the major nations in Canada's goaltending situation, and we've had like no debate about it here.
Yeah, and despite the fact that we feel the least confident, Canada clearly doesn't, because it's the only position where they just invited, in theory, the 3 goalies that they have already either put on the roster or that they've put in, if not permanent marker, have put in pen or pencil, right? They did not bring anybody else. And that orientation camp was not small. And so they chose to take their 3, including Sam Montembeault, who still has, by all measures, a lesser track record than a Darcy Kemper or a Logan Thompson, some of the other goalies that are available to them. So I thought that was telling. Like, they seem committed to Jordan Binnington, Aiden Hill, and Sam Montembeault, and that surprised me. And maybe that's because they got the job done and they know that Binnington's the guy, and they were happy with the role that Aiden Hill and Sam Montembeault played as basically practice goalies for them at the Four Nations. But if Logan Thompson or Darcy Kemper or Mackenzie Blackwood in Colorado, if they're playing well, I don't see, and Sam Montembeault and the Montreal Canadiens struggle and regress maybe a little bit this season, which I think is a very real possibility for the Montreal Canadiens and for Montembeault. I don't see why they wouldn't have brought more goalies to the orientation camp just in case something does go wrong with this shallow pool of goalies and one of them does really struggle. It feels like they've handicapped themselves a little bit. Now, the orientation camp does not mean that those players aren't on their list, but they also have a list that they have to submit on October 15th here, which I believe is 42 players. And I don't know the cap on goalies for that list, but if they lock those 3 in and Thompson, Kemper, and Blackwood aren't on that list on October 15th, which won't have included much regular season hockey, then they have no choice but to run with those guys barring injury. So I did think that was interesting. Like I view Thompson, Kemper, and Blackwood as comparable goalies to Aiden Hill and Sam Montembeault, no?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think you don't feel that amazing about any of it, right? It's just kind of all one big group. And to your point, they may have tipped their hand. Let's wrap there for Team Canada, and let's bring it home today with Team USA. This might honestly be the better debates of the entire episode here. So we're going to do it all at once here in this segment. Corey, you put this one together. Why don't you read us your locks for Team USA?
The forwards who I think are nearly guarantees to make the team, presuming they're healthy, would be the Tkachuk brothers, Brady and Matthew Tkachuk, Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, Jack Hughes. And even though I don't think his offense is as dynamic as those guys, I think Dylan Larkin's for sure to make this team if he's healthy, just because of all the qualities he brings to a hockey team. And then the blue line, it was hard to differentiate the blue line between the locks and the quote-unquote front runners with the categories that we used. I think there's a lot of guys who are really good and seem almost assured to make this team. But the 4 guys who I put as 100% to make this team would have been Quinn Hughes, Zach Rowinski, Charlie McAvoy, and Jacob Slavin. And then the goalie would be, the reigning Vezina winner, Connor Hellebuck.
Dylan Larkin in a lock, I think, is a little interesting. I don't know that I fundamentally disagree, But I think you could have also, I mean, I
Yes.
think I expected him in front runners more so than lock, but I don't necessarily disagree.
I just think the speed, size, compete, offense combination he brings, like I say, he's not going to be in the top 6, but he's on the team. That's kind of how I view this.
And he was excellent against Canada in both games at the Four Nations. I think that's going to count for a lot. It's not just that he was on the team; he was one of their most impactful players in those most important games of the Four Nations. So, anyone have any qualms with the locks before we go to the front runners here?
When Corey was putting this together and I opened up the document after he said that he was done with it, I was not expecting to see Dylan Larkin there. And then as soon as I did, I sort of thought, yeah, you know what? I think that checks out. He was so good at the Four Nations. And I think him just being a captain in the league, the way that he skates, his ability to play different roles, I think Larkin is the only debate there, really. I mean, I know Jack Hughes has been a bit of a mixed bag in playoffs and with USA Hockey at the men's level, but I think Jack's there as well. So I have no issues.
All right, the players Corey has identified as the front runners for this roster are, and this is the guys that we think have like an 80-90% chance of being on this team. Matt Boldy, Jake Gensel, JT Miller at forward. On D, Brock Faber, Jake Sanderson, Seth Jones, goalie Jake Ottinger. I know the name that we're going to spend the most time on in this segment here, but I think JT Miller stands out as well as a guy who I think is bubble for me, but I do think probably ultimately gets the nod onto the team.
Yeah, I'd probably have JT Miller and Seth Jones more bubble than front runners for me. I know Seth had a really nice rejuvenation in Florida, but I still think he's got to prove at least that he's still among the elite of the elite in the league, especially on a blue line that's as loaded as the American group is.
Well, that's the one we're going to spend the most time on. So why don't you just take us right into it, Scott? Seth Jones.
Yeah, it had been like, let's all not forget it was a bad team in Chicago, but he was not at his best there and didn't play well there for a couple of seasons. And now we've seen him play well for a very short stint with a very strong team in Florida. And I think in both cases, the team is probably not telling the true story. The Blackhawks were probably not telling the true story of how far he'd fallen. And I think in Florida, the same is true, where he benefited from playing with very good players all of a sudden. And he looked more like himself. And I think that's positive. And I think he's absolutely belongs in the mix. But when I think of Seth Jones of October 6, 2025, I just don't place him in the same category as a Jake Sanderson or a Brock Faber or an Adam Fox. And I'm sure we'll get to the Fox debate, but I would sooner have Adam Fox all day long on my team over Seth Jones based off what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. Now, if Seth plays lights out in the fall, I think he's in the mix. He's obviously someone that USA Hockey is very familiar with. All of those things matter. I think he is among the 10 or 11 players who are vying for the 8D that they're going to take, but he feels more at the fringes for me than firmly in the mix.
Corey, why don't you give the positive case here for Seth Jones being in this category?
I'll be curious to hear what Chris says, because I know both him and I have been major Seth Jones fans for a long time. And I get, like, listen, he wasn't even in the mix for the February team. So someone might wonder, like, well, was there really enough new information here to get him to the front runner status for the team the following February? And I think he did for 2 big reasons. One, this is still a player with a ton of traits. Like he didn't just come out of nowhere and have a great spring. This has always been an extremely gifted player, great skater, great length, great hockey sense, does a lot of things really well. And so, there's already a really good foundation there, even if he wasn't executing at a high level in Chicago. And then we get to when he gets to Florida and talk about the playoff run. I don't think he was surrounded by a good team. I think he was a reason they were a good team. For me, he was one of the 2, 3, 4 best players for them every single time I watched that team in the playoffs. He was a really impactful defenseman, and I don't see how you can't watch what he did, not just over a couple of games, but over a period of months there in Florida, and not conclude that he's one of the better defensemen in the NHL and that he should be in the mix to be on this team. I think he absolutely has the traits to, we talk about where he's going to fit in this lineup. He's not going to be a top 4 guy. You're talking about like a third pair penalty killing type of guy for this team. This USA blue line so loaded that I think he would excel in like that 5, 6, 7 type of role for this team.
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say, like, I think that the first half of the season is going to loom very largely for Seth Jones, because now he needs to put it together after, having the full off season, and now you got to ramp it back up for this Panthers team. And that will be ultimately if he makes it or doesn't make it, more so than what we saw. But to Corey's point, what we saw over the course of the playoffs was the Seth Jones that I think a lot of us believed. Well, maybe not a lot of us, but those of us that have been following his career since he was a prospect,
there are dozens
believe
of
those,
us.
literally dozens, that saw that type of defenseman in him. A guy that could be relied upon in all situations, a guy that could be playing significant minutes in tough matchups. That is ultimately what we thought he could be. He had, whether, you can say it was his fault or not, the situations he was in over the years never really allowed us to see that full component. So now you put him in a team full of elite players, and now you've got what we saw. So I do think that there's in the mix. The interesting thing is, it's not because I don't think it's the Adam Fox discussion that is as tied to Seth Jones as it is just simply to Adam Fox. And I think even Mike Sullivan has said now publicly that there needs to be some figuring things out for Adam Fox to be in the mix for the Olympics. He's not just giving him a spot. And that's going to be a really interesting debate about how they build this team, because as we talked about, the making sure that you have a team that can play, that faster paced style. Adam Fox thinks the game very quickly. He doesn't necessarily play it very quickly. And I do think that guys and if you're going to be that size and that, like, that's going to be a part of it. He didn't look good at the Four Nations. Like, it wasn't just that, like, he looked outside of himself at the Four Nations, I felt like, and this is a player that I really like too, but that's going to be an absolute discussion. I think, to me, Brock Faber is already a lock for that team. I think Jake Sanderson should be a lock for that team as well. My locks would be probably more aggressive in terms of who's there. I have no problem with these guys being front runners, but the Seth Jones discussion is a real one. And I think it's one that USA Hockey is having. And as much as we talk about like the USA Hockey Canada of it all, Bill Guerin is very much driving the bus on these decisions, and he's doing it in tandem with Mike Sullivan. Mike Sullivan is going to have as much of a say in what this roster looks like as anybody else. And so that does make it interesting in the whole kind of discussion about what's this ultimately going to mean for Adam Fox. He's going to have, it might actually be not beneficiary for Adam Fox to be under Mike Sullivan's watching every single shift of his game, because he will be nitpicked in a way that no other player is. But if Seth Jones just sends Mike Sullivan that highlight tape from the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, he's going to see a guy like, if you can deliver that on the Olympic stage, that makes our D-core better.
Well, I think it's a little different between the Fox debate with USA and Evan Bouchard with Canada. Is I think if you said, well, we need Bouchard to run our second power play unit, and he's like, yeah, like I could see that. Like, we love Morrissey, we love Shea Theodore, but we love Thomas Harley, but Bouchard will do it at a different level. With Team USA, you have Quinn Hughes and Zach Rowinski, and I'm not convinced that Adam Fox runs the power play better than either of them. So then you really ask, well, what is he really providing to our starting six, starting seven at this point? Keep in mind that Hughes was injured at the Four Nations.
We got to decide, is Seth Jones in this group that we're taking here? So Chris, break the tie. Seth Jones, like, are we putting him on, or is he in this bubble group that we're going to debate between?
I as much as I love him, I will put him in the bubble group for now, because I do think that this is the question is yet to be answered about Seth Jones, because the first half will loom large for players like him.
Okay, then Scott, take us right in, and you can go ahead and give us your first bubble answer. We'll start with the D this time.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Adam Fox. I think the conversation around Adam Fox over the last, whatever it is, 6 months since the Four Nations has kind of divorced itself from the reality of what Adam Fox has accomplished to date. So I've actually got some notes, and I'm going to read off some notes. I don't do this very often, but I'm going to read off some notes. He has, in 4 playoff runs, never been outscored in a playoff series at 5-on-5. The goals for and goals against are 36-24 across huge minutes. We're talking 25 minutes a night, 36-24. That's 60%. 6 seasons in the league. He's been a top 5 finalist for the Norris Trophy in 4 of his 6 seasons in the league. Last year, in his so-called down year, finished 12th in Norris voting. He's coming off a serious knee injury last year. He was playing with Ryan Lindgren last year. This is all well known. These are the more important ones. Forget the production. He's fifth among all defensemen in the league since he entered the league in points. He's played at a 70-point pace across 82 games for his career. He's also, and this is the most important part when we talk about 5-on-5 and what he's adding to a team, he is fifth in total goal differential in the NHL among defensemen at 5-on-5 since entering the league. He is plus 117. The names ahead of him are Cale Makar, who's obviously a singular player. The next three names, the only three names other than Cale Makar that are ahead of him, are the agreed upon better defenders on the planet. Gustav Forsling, Jacob Slavin, Devin Taves. So we've got, at 5-on-5, he is in elite company in the NHL in terms of play driving. I just think that because of the missed handoff on the McDavid goal, because of the goal against that he got burned on in the previous game at Four Nations, and because of the way that his role shrunk in that tournament, and because he's not the biggest guy.
And slow.
Whether he's slow or not does not matter to the impact that can be measured and that he has performed at the NHL level over the course of his NHL career. It matters in terms of the way that he's talked about and the ways that he can be better and the ways that he needs to be better. And it sounds like he's been in the gym this year and this summer, and he's super dedicated to improving in that area.
I imagine a lot of players were in the gym this summer.
Yes, but the impact has been just flat out better than the other players who are considered quote unquote bubble guys for this team. Like, he is just better at hockey. These things to a certain degree are measurable. He has performed at a world-class level for he's only been in the league for 6 years, and he has been for all 6 of those years one of the very best players in the world, including last year with Ryan Lindgren coming off of knee surgery, etc. I think the Adam Fox that we're going to see in the first half of this season is going to put this to bed, and he's going to be on Mike Sullivan's team.
In what role?
In whatever role you want to pair him. Whoever you want to play him with, whether it's third pair, PP2. I would have him running PP2 over Zach Werenski, as great as Zach was last year. I think Adam Fox is just a more cerebral, more intelligent player at the top of the umbrella with the puck on his stick and thinks the game at a higher level. I think Adam Fox thinks the game at a higher level than just about anybody. I think he can run your second power play, and I think he can play a regular shift at 5-on-5, whether that's as your 5, 6, 7, whatever defenseman. I think he belongs on that team.
Here's a question. So we talked on the hockey show Monday about the Jets, and I was saying the Jets and the Rangers to me are more similar than anyone really wants to admit in their roster construction. And as I was breaking it down, I'm going, Shesterkin and Hellebuck and some of the way their forwards are grouped, and Morrissey and Fox, I think are probably in a tier. I think I'd prefer Morrissey as a player, but they'd probably be at least in a tier, right? Morrissey's a lock for Team Canada, and we're talking about Fox as a bubble guy for Team USA, and yet I do think that's a legit. I don't even know that I would take Fox on my bubble, because the difference between them in this context, and Scott's stats are all really good, really helpful information, but they are against NHL players and NHL teams in a spread out talent pool, versus at this, it's super concentrated of the best players in the world, and you're kind of within the confines of your team. Whereas Morrissey, I don't think needs one of your 2 power plays to really be impacting the game. I do think Fox does need that, at least to maximize him, right? Like, it's not that I'm saying Adam Fox will ruin the Olympics for you if he's on your team. I don't think that.
You could put Werenski and Fox on the second power play together, though.
You could.
They're also in the context, and sure, it's not the Olympics. They're in the context of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Adam Fox has played deeper into the Stanley Cup playoffs than Jake Sanderson, than Brock Faber. Now, those guys are playing different roles, and Faber, I agree with Chris, belongs on this team. I thought him and Slavin made a great pair and should make a great matchup pair again. But we only talk about these things with Adam Fox. We talk about this, whatever it is, spread out across. We're not discounting Jake Sanderson or Brock Faber because they haven't been on a deep playoff run. And yet we're saying that Adam Fox has issues at this level because he had a couple of bad games at the Four Nations, right? Like, I think that part of it just feels like it has taken on a bit of a life of its own to me.
If you were McDavid or McKinnon and you're coming down the ice on a 2-on-1, 2-on-2, let's say 2-on-2, would you rather one of the defensemen that you're going up against be Seth Jones or Adam Fox?
I would rather not go against a defenseman that is likely to outscore me 36-24 in the playoffs at 5-on-5, which is Adam Fox and not Seth Jones.
You kind of dodged that question right there.
Hey, Scott's ready for a Senate run is what I just learned in that answer. That was deft. That was deft. Chris, what do you think on this one?
Seth Jones, forget coming down on me. Adam Fox is going to beat me back the other way as well. Like, it's not just
he's gonna
about
beat
defending.
Connor McDavid back the other way.
He's going to beat me in a game of 5-on-5 ice hockey. He has proven that he will beat me on the ice at 5-on-5 across 6 seasons in the NHL and across 4 playoff runs.
So here's the thing, like, I know that we don't want to use small sample sizes too much here, but I think the four nations thing does loom large because he was overmatched in a way that I've never seen. And I will grant you, I think he's one of the most intelligent players. I think he is far better defensively than he's ever given credit for because of his anticipation ability. He actually he's really good at defending odd man rushes in terms of how the space that he's able to take away and angles. I think he thinks the game at an incredibly high level. But I do think that in this concentrated area, in this game where a lot of these micro battles are going to be what decides the game, like the margins are so thin between the US and Canada in this event that one bad shift can be the difference in a game between these two teams. And that's where I think like getting a level of comfort with him in the pace of this tournament is where it is. Now, I'm not saying that he's not going to make the team because I think really like we're saying he's on the bubble, which means he's still in the mix. It's not as strong in the mix.
Yeah, we all get 2 here. We all get 2.
I think he's probably on the team despite everything I'm saying right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the thing. There are 8 defensemen taken. You can't convince me that there are 7 better, or 8 better than him. Like I there's no way. And I do think that you need to have him at worst as insurance for if the power play goes south or anything like that. If you do have Werenski running, or maybe you have both of them on PP2, whatever you end up doing, but he is still that player. The question I think is, where do you slot him? And all those 5-on-5 numbers are super important. But again, like how much is he going to play 5-on-5 for this team ultimately? Now, Mike Sullivan may get a better picture of that with the Rangers, with the amount of that he's going to have to play for that team. And I think that's good too. But I do think that, in terms of the way that USA wants to play, and this is another important fact, the way that they want to play, he isn't as adept to playing that style as what the rest of those guys are. And that's where I think Mike Sullivan is going to have some qualms about who they're going to put there. But again, like these are the discussions that we have at the Olympics, because we're talking about a Norris Trophy winning defenseman. We're talking about one of the most productive defensemen over the NHL in the last 5 years. This is absolutely one of the best players in the league. But the margins is where the games will be won and lost, and things like skating and things like size and other things will become part of that discussion when Bill Guerin and Mike Sullivan and the decision makers make those decisions, and they will probably be looking at a lot of that tape from the 4 nations. But again,
did we all not watch Seth Jones get walked for 2 years in Chicago off the rush? Like, why are we any more convinced that in the margins against the best players in the world, against Connor McDavid, that a player like Seth Jones or whoever's next on your list for Noah Hannafin or whoever's next on your list for the American, like I don't know that I'm more convinced that those players aren't going to make a mistake or also get burned playing against Connor McDavid and Mitch Marner and Nathan McKinnon. Like I don't know that any of those guys are equipped to play serious minutes for this USA team anyways.
I think we all agree that Adam Fox is going to be world smarter, massive difference between his puck play and whoever else we're talking about. Like there's no conversation there. We have the 5D that 5 or 6D that we've all kind of established there. So it's Hughes, McAvoy, Slavin, Werenski, Faber, Sanderson. So first question, does anybody here think Fox is in the starting 6 over any of those players?
I do not.
Over any of those main 5?
6.
No.
Faber, Sanderson, McAvoy, Werenski, Slavin, Hughes.
And Hughes, yeah, no.
No, with Hughes healthy, no.
So we're talking about the 7th defenseman right now.
Yeah.
It's an important place. It's in margins, baby. You need that.
I get it.
7th.
I'm just saying.
I could see a scenario where Jake Sanderson has an off night and he's not in my 6 kind of thing. Like Jake would be the 6 there for me.
Right. I guess my question is anybody taking any of those 6 out to put Fox in?
I am not.
No.
Scott's saying he could see a world where he would, even if it's not
I could
his
see
default.
a world where Sanderson isn't in that 6 for me come December.
We got to get to the forwards here. So just real quick, who's everyone's 2? We got 2 spots here. Is it Fox, Jones universally, or is anyone dissenting there?
I think it's Fox Jones for me. And then I am keeping an eye on Hannafin, and the other guy I'm really keeping an eye on after his World Championships is Jackson Lacombe. I think he is probably more in that conversation than the average person reading hockey content would be aware of. I think they are really high on him, and I think if he has a really good first half, I think he's in the starting 8.
All right. So that's the defenseman. We got a lot of forwards to get to in a very small amount of time here. So let me just read you the guys that we have highlighted that Corey put together on the bubble and the dark horse categories. And if you want to throw in a long shot, we got 5 names everyone's got to get to.
And I think we're kind of including JT Miller in there now, right? I think that's what you guys wanted to do.
All right, so let's bump. I think he's going to end up in it. Just looking at this thing, so I'm fine to leave him in front runners. Just the more I look at this bubble.
So we have 9 forwards. Then we need to take 5. 4 then.
14 and 8, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
5.
5.
All right, so here's the names we're choosing from. It's Logan Cooley, Kyle Connor, Clayton Keller, Patrick Kane, Matthew Nyes, Brock Nelson, Jason Robertson, Tage Thompson, Vincent Trocheck, Cole Caulfield, Shane Pinto. I think this is kind of our pool, but feel free. I know Matty Beniers, Ryan Leonard, Frank Nazar, Brian Rust, Alex Tuck, all also would be in that pool. So 5 names. Corey, go ahead. Who's your 5?
I'm kind of envisioning a 4th line with Logan Cooley in between Brock Nelson, and I would have gone in between Nyes and Trocheck. I might lean towards Trocheck just for the experience there. I could really go either way there. I'll lean towards Nyes, but it'd be really close. Then for the 14th forward, I think the 13th forward, sorry. I think Tage Thompson is an ideal 13th forward with all the tools and traits he brings to the table. The size, the skating, the skill. I think that'd be really appealing. And then for the 14th, I probably should have flipped these guys, but Kyle Connor would be in there. I know he didn't have a great tournament in February, but he's still a dynamic player, and he should be on this team.
All right, Scott, who's your 5?
I'm going to include JT Miller, but I'm not sure he would be the very next name on my list. Like, he might be more of a 13th or 14th forward for me, but I think he is on this team. And then I'm going Logan Cooley, Kyle Connor, Clayton Keller, and Tage Thompson. I know 3 of those names skew a little bit smaller, but between Tage, even Eichel, Larkin, Matthews, the Kachuk brothers, I don't think Matt Boldy, I know he doesn't play that way, JT Miller, they've got enough size. I think Cooley's we've talked about it on the pod a little bit already. I think Cooley goes nuclear this year. I think he's one of the breakout candidates in the league for me this season. I think he's going to have a massive year, play his way onto this team. I agree with Corey, Kyle Connor, and his offense, whether he's playing for you in every single game or not, despite his struggles at Four Nations last year. I think Kyle's talent, I believe he's tied with Austin or a couple of goals behind Austin over the last 5 years for goals by American forwards, ahead of the Kachucks and all of these guys, ahead of Eichel. I think Kyle's on the team, and I think I like the way that Clayton Keller's game has really developed here. And I think he's more than just a playmaking winger now. I like his play off the puck. I think he belongs in this group, and they clearly feel coming out of Men's Worlds, I think it showed that they clearly like him and they feel like they can trust him. So I think I'd go Cooley, Connor, Keller, Tage, and JT Miller as those 5.
Miller was in our 9, so you get one more.
Okay. See, this is maybe Trocheck as the next guy. Like, I don't think Nelson's there anymore. I think we saw that last year. I don't think Brock's there anymore. I don't love Jason Robertson as a fit for this team. I just think unless he's playing in an offensive role, he doesn't add a ton. And I don't think Nyes is there. So I'd maybe go Trocheck.
All right, Chris, who you got? Who's your 5?
Yeah, this is a tough one too, because I think that as I look at this roster and I'm starting to try to like plot out roles, I feel like in the case of Canada, we had a lot of guys that fit certain roles, or could fit a lot of different roles. In USA's case, they've got a lot of high octane offensive players, more where you've got your guys like that we already have on the roster, like a Larkin, like Miller, like Boldy, that I think are going to give you some good two-way capabilities. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where it gets a little bit tougher for me. But I said, well, if that's what the player pool gives you, lean into it. So I've got Kyle Connor in there. I just think the goal scoring is too much of a factor. Clayton Keller is absolutely in the mix there as a guy that you want to have on your team. I think that he makes a lot of plays, and I think that him getting the captaincy, like I think of the players that did not make the Four Nations team, I think he was one of the guys that really was the most upset by it, and then comes back, goes to Worlds, wears the C, leads him to the gold medal. I think that's a guy that you're bringing. Tage Thompson, I think that his fate was sealed at the World Championships as well. Also, the fact that you get a big forward, a guy that can play a little bit all over the lineup. You can find ways for him to make an impact in the game. So I've got Connor, Keller, Thompson. I think that means you also got to bring, I think Logan Cooley is another guy where he's probably my 14th forward. He's a guy that I think that you can have in the mix as a player that can slot around your lineup and give you that speed factor, play at the pace that you want to. And I've got one more, right? I've got
one more
so far.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is where I debated. I think Brock Nelson has been one of the great soldiers of USA hockey over the years, where he's such a good two-way player. He does so many things well, but I think I want to skew younger here, and I'm actually going to go with Matthew Nyes. I think the size factor that he brings, that there's some, you can get a little more power out of your lineup. I can see him playing on a line with some other big players that could potentially, make things a little bit more difficult on Canada's blue line when you're playing Team Canada, because as we assume that there's going to be a collision course between these two teams, and that's ultimately who you're building the team for. I think that, this U.S. team that we have collectively and what we have now is it's faster. And again, like Scott said, we're leaving out Jason Robertson, who is a guy that I think a lot of us figured would be a lock for these types of national teams. The pace of the game is really the difference maker there. And he is not somebody that plays at the pace that the Olympics are going to be played at. And that's why it's really that, to me, that's the biggest reason that you leave him out. Even though I think he's one of the smart players, really processes the game at a tremendous speed, just doesn't play it at the pace I think USA is going to need to play at.
I do think they are going to bring one of Nelson or Trocheck, because I think
that's true.
Against Team Canada, because you're going to need a fourth line center. You need a guy who can play D zone draws, who can kill penalties, who can, outmuscle guys, and all those, those young players or smaller players are going to have, even though Trocheck's on the smaller side, he's sturdy. Like I can't see them not bringing one of those two guys on this team just for very specific situational usage.
Yeah, that's a really good call out, because as I look, it's just like the roles of the team. It's like who, how much of the defensive matchups are you giving to Dylan Larkin all the time if he's the only guy like that. So then you probably do end up bringing a Larson or a Nelson.
I could see Austin in that kind of a role as well.
And he's gonna have to play in that way.
Yeah, he's gonna have to PK, and yeah.
All right, so mine would be Tage Thompson, Kyle Connor. I agree about Nyes. I'll take Trocheck between those two. The one that I'm hemming and hawing over is Logan Cooley versus Patrick Kane. And I think the future-minded angle that we've talked about with Celebrini would certainly lead you to Cooley. But I look at this USA team, and Austin Matthews wore the C for them at the Four Nations. But doesn't it feel like when you look at this player pool that the guy who screams out captain of this group is Patrick Kane? I mean, he is Mr. USA. He's been there, done that. All these guys grew up idolizing him. He has to have a really good first half to make this team. And I don't know if that's going to happen. But he is the one that, if I had to guess, I bet USA Hockey's rooting for him to do that.
They might be. He's certainly most of those guys idol, in terms of that he's really set. Why is this team so skilled? That Patrick Kane birthed a generation of skill players in the US. And I think for me, it's a tough sell, just because of the pace, and he's not at the same pace that he was as a younger man. I think I'd be intrigued by it. I'm sure I agree with you. They're probably rooting for it. I just think that now they're at a stage where there can't be it feels too much like a nostalgia pick. And I know if like Patrick Kane is going to use that as fuel, he wants to play.
He looks really good this preseason.
Yeah,
really
and let's see where again, the first half is going to loom super large on those last decisions. So it's not out of the realm of possibility.
On the pace note, and he's not going to be on this team, but on the pace note, I thought it was awesome that they invited Frank Nazar to the orientation camp after the way that he played at Men's Worlds. And it's just preseason hockey, but boy, oh boy, has preseason hockey Frank Nazar looked really good again here. So I'm just fascinated to see what he does in the next few months here.
We are short for time here, so I can't ask you all for your last goalie. So congratulations, Jeremy Swayman. You get it by default. That is going to do it for us on this episode of the Athletic Hockey Show. You can catch more of Chris over at Flow Hockey on his podcast Called Up. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell to stay informed on the latest in the world of hockey. And join our Discord community and stay tuned here for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.